So what I want to share with you today begins with 10,000 steps. Because for me, temporarily able-bodied as I am, walking is the form of movement that propels me through my world and helps me find peace and calm on the journey. And I walk because I find knowledge in the act of walking. I am the child of a scientist and a teacher. I am raised up to believe that salvation is found in facts and in words alone. But there's this curiosity, this why, that's held in the child part of me that is always asking what I can learn by walking under the stars at night and walking in front of the dawn in the morning. What I can learn from the forever soul of that child that wants to embrace the beauty of the morning as I walk to greet the day and the gorgeous and mysterious beckoning of the night sky, which speaks to some greater source of rest. In troubled times when both our human societies and our communities of life of which we are a part in this earth seem tenuous at times, we need to be reminded, I believe, that we have many, many, many sources of knowing, and that we have many sources of renewal available just to us in an instant. In an age where truth just keeps getting tumbled onto its head again and again, and where arguing facts really doesn't seem to get us that far, except locked into frustration in our own frames. There are many sources of knowing, and this is good to know. So I want to talk today a little bit about mine, about the peace born out of a commitment this summer to walk 10,000 steps a day, and to keep asking questions as I walked, to keep making meaning and beauty and reaching for connections and honoring all of my intelligence, including those given to me by my emotions on those walks. Today I want to talk about how wholeness can be reborn within us step by step, day by day, 10,000 steps at a time. And some of you are going to ask me how my summer was, and so I'm going to say it was one in which I was witness to a great deal of what can challenge the sinews of the heart. But it also had great moments of connection and beauty and joy and insight. Wisdom was abundant in my summer, and it was found less in the pages of books, though I read a great deal. You should all be relieved. Those of you that need me to read books, I read them. And it wasn't found as much in great words, though I listened to many. I was very privileged to listen to many. But I found it more in the whisper of the plants I watered, the soil I touched, and the views of intimate relationship with the planets this summer, which nightly put my own existence back into a proper posture of humility. Choice by choice, action by action, we all live more fully or less completely into this imperfect and precious world. Okay, so we're going to keep it real here. My journey some days was like 7,500 steps, maybe 5,500 steps. There might have been even like a 3,200 step day, could be. But it was interesting how even that short walk down the block between 11:30 and midnight, when the step counting app on my phone seemed particularly ominous, would push me a little bit into that zone of greater openness and knowing. Because somehow, after moving, I could take in the knowledge born of my emotions, born of that feeling wheel, that understanding of intelligence found somewhere between mad, sad, scared, and glad, somewhere in the messy and magical creation of human connection. And what I want to share with you this morning is really just that sense of journey through some questions and the answers I found, which allowed me, moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day, to live more fully into my life. Botanist and wisdom teacher Robin Wall-Kimmerer, a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, reminds us that in indigenous ways of knowing, we only know something when we know it not only with our intellect, but rather with our whole body, with our intuition, with our emotions, and with our spirit. Only then, she says, can we truly know and listen and learn. Since before my age knew double digits, I have sought new worlds and new ideas through the pleasure of walking, usually late at night, though driving is also a great pleasure. But walking especially clears my mind. It unclenches my heart after hard days so that other things can come in. Decades since I was a preteen traveling through New Jersey streets in late hours of the night that I really shouldn't have been out there, singing the songs that would literally flow out of me when I was in that place of just knowing, songs that I would just have made up in my mind. Scientists have found big words to describe what my body just essentially knew, what bodies have known since the earliest evolution. They call it transient hypofrontality. Transient hypofrontality, isn't that poetic? Yes. That's what scientists now call what others think of as the zone or that runner's high, right? That's what it's called, transient hypofrontality. But now that we have these big words, we know that it's true. I find it easier just to call it that zone of flow. But neuropsychologist Rex Young says that for a while, under certain conditions, the focused thinking part of our brain needs a rest. That allows other parts and other functions of our being and of our brain to become more predominant. And you get there by moving, by listening to music, by swaying, or just by breathing with intention. So in the summer, it is true that human beings tend to interact just a little bit more with the physical world. And in the pre-industrial world, that was the time of harvest. It was the time of really interacting with the earth. And in this time that we have, it's still true that winter's a little bit more the time of dormancy and hibernation, and summer's a little bit more of that time of engaging with all of this. In our post-industrial, time-sucking consumerist world, we still need to experience those rhythms through our rush and tumble lives. And even though the summers get shorter and shorter, I personally just think that means we get to do it in smaller bursts throughout the year, touching the earth and the water, the air, and increasingly feeling in our bodies the physical foreboding that fire has come to mean to us in the summer. Because you are people with many ways of knowing, you have no doubt figured out that this is a sermon of many steps. Step one is that knowledge that comes from our body. It's that beautiful gift of serene movement that Dennis shared with us through that gate of Tai Chi. It's when we hold the sun-warmed tomato, or we feel the coolness of water on our hand, or we watch the hawks circle outside the Borton Hall. Step two is to recognize that, as a teacher of mine once told me, feelings are messengers, and the messages that they bring are another way of knowing. When I'm feeling great joy or I'm feeling deep sorrow, I need to stop and pay attention, for these emotions are also a form of intelligence. They tell me something about the life that I am living. And the answer is not to stuff them away or to look away. It is to see their intelligence and move into this knowing. Writer Miguel Clark Mallet says, "In my own case, my impulse to reject my emotional feeling self was driven by the risks involved. In my family, work, relationships, and even writing, expressing feelings ran the risk of opening myself to ridicule or rejection. The way my feelings and emotions could render me vulnerable frightened me for a long time, and it seemed easier, behind a calm and reasonable veneer, to stay safe and project a dispassionate persona. Instead now, I no longer see my depression, my grief, my anxiety, or anger as the enemy. I try to treat them as messengers sent to caution me, to remind me of the need for self-care," he says, "to help me reassess, release attachments, encourage me to re-examine my deepest values, to come to my rescue." So I invite you to take a moment and just tune in for a second. What emotions are with you today? Is it joy at some celebration you were part of this summer, or perhaps a new work opportunity, or a new life in your family? Is it sorrow at a loss that you have sustained, or that our world or our country or the people that are our neighbors have sustained? Is it anger that I'm asking you this question? But knowing where we are in the emotional landscape is like holding a compass that can tell us where we need to go next. Step 3 moves us into that realm of curiosity and creativity. It is the beauty of the music that stirs our hearts to great heights and releases emotions we can't know through simple words. Albert Einstein, known as an intellectual genius, believed actually it was more important to be a spiritual genius. He knew there was more than one kind of intelligence, and he said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world." If there's one thing we know about our times, it is that our world could use some encircling. This could all be summed up by the words of our songs, all of which seem to have asked today, why? I am a writer. I love words. I love the life of the mind. I love concepts and systems and the ways that we figure out how to do better what it is that we do together. And yet this morning, I am asking us to consider that our strength in this world, in these times, comes less from speaking than from seeking. We can find more comfort perhaps in color and in pattern, literally coloring inside or outside or alongside the lines. Neuropsychologist Rex Jung says, "When I got into neuropsychology and started doing research, I got interested in intelligence, and I studied that for a number of years. Over time, it came to my awareness that the intellectual capacity of the brain doesn't tell the whole story. There are other human capacities that are of interest, particularly that of creativity, and that might be something different from intelligence and uniquely different to our brains." So I invite you to look down at what you drew on your squiggle, what you intuited from the line on your order of service. Does it touch a feeling that you've had, or perhaps a whimsy that you wanted to engage? Does it travel near a memory? Our feelings are generous guides. Step 4 is about connection. Connecting with those around us and also with our spirit. For connections are life-giving in this world in which disconnection is rampant and loneliness is epidemic. We celebrate the start of our religious education program today. Now I'm always going to look up when I say religious education. And in many ways, what we offer here is connection. We connect people with time-honored truths, but we also offer the beauty of connection in a multi-generational community, which is very rare in our world today, very rare. These are important things in our times. So this is a sermon of many steps. And if I imagine that I am moving between them, then this is the journey, whether I'm walking or rolling, from the place of the feelings to the place of the body, to the place of the creativity, to the fourth step place of connection and spirit. And just as our breath is our lifeline, our spirit reconnects us to our being, and so, in doing, allows other connections. We need places in our lives throughout our years, not just in the summers, where we hold the space and the breadth to consider the largest questions of life, where we consider what it means to be a person and all that is our life. I have been talking about travel that begins with 10,000 steps, yet one of the great Chinese sages, Lao Tzu, reminds us that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and it can be a virtual one. So each of us begins the quest for peace and power every day by rolling over into our day, by deciding to lift our head from the pillow, by seeking solace in all the ways of knowing that are ours. In a world in which some of our children are already looking at their second Monday back in school, and in which some of our children are still incarcerated, separated from their families. In a world in which our summers are marked by racial tensions and a very clear delineation between who has and who has not, and verbal violence from the highest offices of our land, in which the rising temperature of our planet, it creates a culture of volatility and unpredictability. We need all the sources of knowing we can have. So what I present to you today is a sermon that I thought about because I thought about all of you through about 400,000 steps since I was last in this pulpit preaching. That is the journey of my summer. I hope some of the questions of my heart touched the questions of your hearts. The word healing means to make whole, but in our tradition, we believe that that quality of innate wholeness is already within each of us. That doesn't mean sometimes we don't need a little reminder that we have to go and nurture it. We need to remember all the ways of knowing, all the steps, the flows of truth, all that is our life, the wisdom of our body, the compass of our feelings, the insights of our imaginations, and the truths of our connections can all be our guides. One step, one movement, one squiggle, one breath at a time. Let's go have a year together.